Good afternoon and welcome to the Using Technology Better Show. My name is Blake Seifert, and today there's a bit of a mutiny going on. Mike Redding, my co-host, is not joining us today, so I'm really looking forward just to getting down to business today and exploring some interesting stuff with our guest this afternoon, Bharath from Securly. Bharath, mate, do you want to introduce yourself and sort of what you're about?
Sure. So first off, Blake, thank you for having me on the show. So I'm one of the co-founders of Securly. I'm also the CTO of Securly. So Securly is a Silicon Valley-based education technology company that does online child safety. Essentially, we don't think of ourselves as a web filter, which is more of a 20th century thing. We think of us as a company that measures and manages online screen time for children.
Okay.
And we're cloud-based, and we are built from the ground up for schools. We just came out of the parent product. Where we are.
Fantastic. And how many schools are you in at the moment?
500 schools. The overwhelming majority of those are in the United States. We have some early traction in the UK, Australia, and Canada.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, so I mean, you've got a lot of schools there. I'm sure you're collecting a ton of data on a daily basis. I'm sure it's off the charts amount of data. And really what I want to talk to you about first, I think, is about what you see. I mean, you're seeing a lot of different trends. You're probably seeing a lot of interesting welfare issues pop up, interesting data and security issues. What are the sorts of things that you see in schools that perhaps, I don't know, for our audience that could get a little bit of value out of that and see, well, what are some things that I should be looking at my school, even without a product like Securly? What do I need to be worried about? What do I not need to be worried about?
It's interesting how even with schools with very open policies, we of course have schools at different ends of the spectrum. Those, for example, in rural America that have very stringent lockdown policies, and those on the coast that are more liberal, that have less lockdown policies. And you'd be surprised how with even schools with open policies, you have 50% or more of the time spent online being spent on education, being spent on worthwhile, pursuits, I would say, and how there needle certainly moves in favor of time sink activities when the child goes home, but you'd be surprised how much learning goes on even at home.
Right. So, so a lot of schools have, wide open internet. You're saying.
I'm sorry.
You're saying a lot of schools have wide open internet, and
they do have well. The U.S. has a law called CIPA, Children's Internet Protection Act, and basically what CIPA does is it mandates schools to use some form of web filtering. So,
yeah.
so they do the basic pornography blocking, and even with just the basic blocking, you'd be surprised, like I said, how much time is spent online on educational pursuits.
Okay, yeah, I think that's interesting. I mean, we run a very open house here at McKinnon. We don't do a lot of active blocking of students, and what we find overwhelmingly is that freedom to not have to go and get something unblocked because I need to use it for school, that freedom to just go and do it without asking for permission, I think it really shows itself, especially in art and places where sometimes the lines are a little bit blurred, and I think that sort of old school methodology of locking everything down in the long run can hurt, or from my experience can hurt I guess teacher creativity and teacher innovation. Would you agree with that?
Well, like I said, Blake, in my introduction, we find the concept of web filtering to be so 20th century, and we don't really think of ourselves as a web filter anymore. The tagline on our homepage will change soon to reflect a new message, and that message would be measuring and managing screen time. So it's not so much about blocking stuff anymore, it's about giving teachers and school administrators and parents the intelligence as to how technology resources are being used by kids. How are kids spending their life online? What are they saying on social networks? What are they searching for? What YouTube videos are they watching to learn? That sort of thing. So it's less about blocking stuff and more about measuring and managing how kids are using technology. And we think it's a subtle but important shift in the way we see things.
Yeah, it seems like one thing that impresses me about your company is it's driven by the teaching and learning outcomes, not the sort of the inner control freak in all of us that wants to lock things down. So I think that's a really good philosophy and really interesting. But what do you say, just playing devil's advocate to the people that talk about this just being a fear tactic, like, why do we need to snoop into their social media accounts? We all we all got up to no good when we were at school and we turned out okay. What do you say to that? Is this just fear mongering? There's a lot of this stuff, people spending money because they're worried about what can happen, about covering themselves.
I mean, I can pull a dozen use cases out of thin air, pretty much. What if we had the most popular YouTube video across a certain district, and what if we share that information with another district? What if teachers within a certain district, share information with each other as to, here's the most popular YouTube video in my class. Now, why don't you use that as a teaching resource in your class? And as an IT admin in a local district I met with recently, came up with the following use case, right? Let's say a teacher had access to search logs during a certain classroom time. Now, the search logs basically, give the teacher an idea of what kids are searching for during a classroom lesson. So that is information he or she can then use to improve her lesson plan. So those are a couple of things right there. It might seem like snooping, but really it is intelligence for parents and teachers to learn about how kids are learning.
Sure. So what would you say, I mean, if a school's looking at going down this path, they want to find out more information about their classes and about their student activity, what are the key things that you want to look for? Is it, their activity after hours? Is it contrasting that to their learning inside class hours? What are the things that we should be looking for?
So really, each environment is different. So really, having said that, Australia is of course very different from the United States, and I wouldn't bet on what is happening in the United States is something that would happen in Australia. So really, the key is to measure, right? So I'll give you an example of this local school, Summit Public Schools. There are 6 charter schools in San Francisco Bay Area, and if you've ever seen the movie Waiting for Superman, Summit was featured in Waiting for Superman. And they recently went one-to-one Chromebooks across all Summit schools, but they're somewhat hesitant about going one-to-one take-home. And they started the take-home program as a pilot in one of the schools with Securly plugin on those Chromebooks. Now, they're not filtering at home because it's against the school's policy to filter at home. But what they're doing is they're sending the Chromebooks home with the Securly extension on it, and they're gathering data about what kids are doing at home, are they actually learning at home. And basically, they take all of the data and present to the school leadership and make a call about going take home across all 6 or all 7 Summit schools next year. So again, the key is not to look for certain things. The key is to look for data and to measure and figure out what to look for.
Sure. So what about data mining? Like we talk about, Google got into a lot of hot water over this recently, looking at how data and off particular services, and I suppose this is a similar thing in terms of you're mining that data for the use of the school. And while it may be within a legal boundary, what about the moral implications of that? Is there things we need to be thinking about monitoring kids inside their own home? Do you have to make it very clear to the kids that that's going to happen? What's sort of the thinking around that?
Well, as far as the integrity of the data itself is concerned, let me sort of address that by saying that we are pretty much committed to not use for commercial purposes. The data belongs to the school and to the child and the parents of the child, and we're cognizant of that. Now, having said that, at least in the U.S., the expectation of being filtered is pretty much factored into a one-to-one program. So it should not be surprising for kids or their parents to see certain I guess inappropriate content being blocked at home, because after all, it's a school device, and the way the school sees it, we're investing resources into buying this thing for the child. Now it's really up to us to try and figure out how we can optimize it for learning purposes, and that's where the filtering comes in. So
the schools pay for the device and put it in the hands of the children. Is that right?
Exactly. It's exactly correct.
Okay, so in a model where it's parent funded, like most of the models are, certainly in Victorian schools, but around the country, where state schools in particular, funded by the government, often put that cost back onto the parent, and they buy a device, and this term BYOD, bring your own device, which can often be bring your own disaster. But is there different thinking around that? I mean, you wouldn't want to be putting something on that monitors that child's device when at home if it's theirs, would you?
That is correct. There's lots of schools in the United States that do have a BYOD program or that have a parent-funded Chromebook program, and those schools generally shy away from using off-site filters on those Chromebooks or on those devices. But really, the trend in the United States is, I think schools are starting to discover that the cost of Chromebooks have dropped below the price of paper textbooks. So it's really about moving money from paper textbooks into the Chromebook world. It's really reallocation of resources to save money and basically use free online curricula.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? The whole cloud-based curriculum is sort of taking over, in a sense. And I guess you can track that now with Securly, and that'd be one of the benefits of it, is to see, well, what resources are being used and try and draw those conclusions.
Exactly.
So in terms of tracking, I mean, is that all Securly does? Is it just a monitoring and filtering product? Is that sort of the start and the end of it?
No, it's quite the contrary, actually. 2 years ago that would have been true. That was the start end of it. We started with a cloud-based web filtering service for schools, but in the past year, really, what that has evolved to become is just the substrate of what we do. It's still the core engine. There's a core filtering engine, but we've built a couple of different value adds on top of that core substrate. One value add is, of course, reporting. We have extremely visual reports, which I can sort of show you in a minute.
Yeah, that would be good. Just maybe take us through the
Sure.
Maybe take us through the product itself. I know the insights are really interesting, and I think it'd be interesting to see what it looks like, and also how it works as well. Do we have to install an app on every computer? I mean, what's the setup involved for a school to turn this into a solution?
Sure, absolutely. So on the Chromebooks, it's a piece of cake. It's simply a Chrome extension that you push out to the Google Apps admin control panel. And for every other device, I'm sorry?
Do you need the control panel to do that in order to push that out? Do you have to purchase that admin panel with your Chromebooks?
Yes, we do. Yes, you do. And I'm not sure how it works in Australia, but at least in the US, doing that is pretty much the norm with all Chromebook programs.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's sometimes a bit of a grey area about whether we need it or not, but certainly for things like this we do, by the looks of it.
Yep. And that is just for the Chromebooks, but we are also able to filter any other device anywhere. MacBooks, Windows PCs, iPads, both within and outside the network. And for every other device, it's really a DNS-based setting. So you just point your local DNS to forward out to Securly, and we seamlessly filter all those other devices in much the same way we filter Chromebooks.
So we change that DNS at the school level or at the device level?
At the school level. Basically, most schools still have a local DNS server that they would use to resolve on their local domains that are authoritative on, and the ones that they do not resolve get forwarded to Securly.
Okay, and when they go home, then obviously they wouldn't be monitored with that model. It's only the Chromebooks that you can monitor outside of the school. Is that right?
Quite the contrary. Like I said, we can monitor iPads, Windows PCs, and MacBooks as well outside the campus.
Okay, cool. So, do you want to show us sort of what it looks like when you've got some users on Securly? What sort of benefits you can demonstrate for us?
Sure, absolutely. So this is kind of what the dashboard looks like, over a 1 week period. And by the way, you can change this to a day, a week, or a month. For over a 1 week period, you have 90,000 searches in this district, 35,000 videos watched, and 8,000 Wikipedia articles. And sort of here's a feed of latest activity across the entire district. Time spent on various sites, 10,000 hours cumulatively across Google, across the entire district. 2,500 hours cumulatively across the entire district on YouTube. And categories, what are kids spending time on? So the users is basically which kids are spending the most amount of time engaging with educational content. What are they searching for? What are the top searches? The social stuff I'll come to in a minute. And basically what this is supposed to be is a map with all of the Chromebooks placed on physically. So as you can see, Blake, this is not so much filtering, but it's simply an accounting of how technology resources are being used by the child.
Sure. Yeah, it looks fantastic. I like that way you can drill down. drilled right down into each of those subsections. So how are you assigning what is educational content? Do you have a big database of that? Do you manage all that yourself?
That is exactly correct. We do have a database of what is educational versus what is not. And we maintain a list of top educational sites as requested by our district, by our districts that we serve, and that's how it goes.
Okay, fantastic. It's a good overview for sure. Another question just around the philosophy of monitoring and things like that. Is there a feeling or a sense that if you're going to account for all this data and the kids know that you're doing this, they know that you're watching what they're doing, that they're going to try and get around it, by tethering to their phone or using an alternate, anonymous proxy or trying something different. How do you sort of get around that? I mean, you know what's happening on the connections that you've set, but if they're tethering to their phone, surely that stuff isn't picked up.
Well, actually, again, quite the contrary, because if they tether to the phone, the Chrome extension is still on the Chromebook.
On the Chromebook, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So the filtering happens on the Chromebook. As far as anonymous proxies are concerned, most CJ proxies have fairly standard strings you can look for in the response content that help us block them proactively.
Okay. Fantastic. So what about if they're inside the school grounds and they're using their mobile phone connected to the Wi-Fi, is that going to be monitored as well?
That is going to be monitored. The only thing we cannot monitor because it's technologically impossible to do so is 3G and 4G on personal mobile phones, right? That is something we cannot possibly monitor, and that's what we don't monitor. But if the child is using the school Wi-Fi, they get served the school's DNS, and which of course gets filtered by security.
Sure. So you're still not capturing. I mean, a lot of social media goes on phones, and if they're not connecting to the Wi-Fi, then there would possibly be things you're not capturing through there. But you think that's quite a small percentage of the total traffic?
Quite the contrary. Again, I mean, from a U.S. perspective, a lot of kids come to school with cell phones. I think it would be naive to feel like they wouldn't come to school with cell phones. But most schools are also smart enough to realize it's not really a liability issue for them. What is a liability issue is if a child goes off track on a school-owned device. So that's how most schools tend to see it, at least out here. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the liability issue, which is kind of not really where your product's focused, though, is it? I mean, there's a lot of other products out there that are really focused on that, on risk management and liability. But I think one of the things I like with this product is it's focused on teaching and learning outcomes. And I guess it's up to the school to make a decision on what is where the line is in the sand on, are we protecting our kids or are we sort of suppressing them or blocking their freedom? I mean, it's certainly a discussion we've had here, and our concerns would be that we are opening a box that, like a Pandora's box of stuff that perhaps, might not be the best thing for us to be looking into. But on the flip side, some schools just use it when there is a welfare issue. They can go back and look through that student's information. So it's a really interesting and divisive issue, and I'm not sure what the right.
There is the right answer. The right answer is a function of culture, really. Just yesterday I was reading an article that said Denmark has absolutely no filtering, and they encourage the kids to cross the road and potentially get into dangerous situations and deal with those situations. But in the U.S. there's a law, and the U.K. has a law as well. So the right answer is really a function of culture, and even more so in the United States, it's a function of subculture. The CIPA law, for example, says that you don't have to filter at home, and many schools are like, okay, we're compliant with CIPA if we don't filter at home, so they choose not to filter at home. But yet other districts we serve in rural America, even though CIPA says we don't need to filter at home, take that step anyway because of blowback from the parent community. In places like Missouri or Kansas, the Chromebook is the only device the child owns, unlike, let's say, San Francisco, where every child has access to 5 or 10 devices. And rightly so, the parents in these places have, I guess, founded fears about what would happen if the child comes home with the device for the very first time. And that's kind of where, a child safety product would come in.
Yeah, I can understand that for sure, and I think we have
And
different.
position securely really varies across cultures. Like so, because if I talk to somebody in Denmark, I would say we are not a web filter. We basically measure and manage screen time. But if I talk to somebody in Kansas or Missouri, I'd say we are a web filter because that's what you're using us for. So that's one of the interesting things about positioning and securely selling securely in the field to our customers. We are different things to different people, depending on cultural circumstances.
Mm. And I think that is very telling here in regional schools. There is a concern with parents that don't understand quite what's going to happen when their kid brings a laptop home and connects to the internet and does things that perhaps they're not even aware of. So I think
Hmm.
there is a need for a duty of care there, and certainly in primary schools I think there's a need for duty of care. But our philosophy here has been in secondary to give kids control over their education, and that extends to them managing their time and managing themselves online, and we provide digital citizenship and education around that. And that's been our approach, and that's worked well for us, but I certainly wouldn't like to apply that to every school in the country, or much less in the world. So it's been really interesting talking to you today, Bharath. I'd like to thank you for coming on the show. Is there anything else you wanted to show about the product itself? Is there anything that perhaps would be interesting, especially for the Australian New Zealand market, or anything like that?
Sure, absolutely. Well, I don't have it live right now, but basically one of the things that we're extremely proud of is the fact that we have pioneered the idea of social media monitoring. So schools in the United States, a lot of them just block Facebook and Twitter outright at home. So the first step and really, like you said, Blake, our philosophy is focused on educational outcomes, and the philosophy is really focused on opening up the internet versus closing it up. And the first step we took to encourage schools to allow Facebook and Twitter for students is this notion of a relaxed take-home policy. So the idea is to keep these sites blocked in school where there could be a legitimate classroom distraction, but as the child goes home with a Chromebook, we open up Facebook and Twitter under a relaxed take-home policy. But not all schools bit, so we took it one step further, and we basically made Facebook posts and Twitter posts available in an audit trail for auditing by IT admins. So that also is not where we stopped. So we've gone one step further beyond that, and we are now um, processing all of these posts and tweets through a natural language processing algorithm, and we're actually partnered up with a well-known researcher in NLP who works at UC Santa Cruz, and we're basically using her work to further essentially detection of cyberbullying and those sorts of undesirable incidents, if you will, that any
Wow.
administrator would be interested in learning about. So
Yeah,
so
no,
just
sorry.
just a few weeks ago, actually, we preempted a potentially serious incident in Kansas, one of the customers, and this girl posted on Facebook something like, "Slowly, I'm realizing I don't have a purpose here, so everybody say goodbye because Friday it's all over." And that was alarming, and that was caught by our algorithm proactively, and it was certainly alarming enough for us to want to alert the school authorities. And now the interesting thing about the tweet, the post, was that there's no single word in there that could be detected by a traditional keyword matching algorithm. Nothing like suicide or kill or depressed. It's just combinations of words that had an intensely negative sentiment associated with them. And it's kind of what we caught. And the interesting thing is, schools in the U.S. are not proactively asking for this. It's something we are doing as part of our double bottom line mission for schools. We are, after all, interested in online child safety, and we want to go beyond just blocking to doing what no product has done before, which is essentially ensuring the safety of these kids on social networks.
Mm. And I think there's tremendous need. I like that you're trying to open social networks up, because I think learning is where kids are, and they're all on social networks. And if we're not embracing that, it's, at some point, if we're just blocking them out, they're going to figure out a way to get on there, and we're not going to be there to, like you say, enforce that protection layer and help them and work through potential life-threatening situations. So, really interesting story, and I do thank you for coming on the show. It's been really interesting to talk through it, and I know divisive. I'm sure our viewers will have their own opinions on it, and certainly if they do, feel free to send Bharath an email at Securely. We'll have all his details in the show notes, and put a comment on our YouTube video, and just say hello. If you want to come on the show as well, we're more than happy to have you on. You can apply through utbshow.com. So again, Bharath, I'd like to thank you so much for your time. Good luck with your product. It's fantastic.
Likewise.
And yeah, we'll see everyone next time on the Using Technology Better show.